I always thought I was one of the lucky ones. I met Caroline when we were both in college, and it felt like we were meant to be. She was smart, funny, and had this spark that made every day feel like an adventure. We got married right after graduation, and for the first few years, everything was perfect. You know, the kind of life you imagine in your 20s. Good jobs, nice apartment, plenty of time for fun. But life has a funny way of changing when you're not paying attention. I'm Ethan, by the way, 35, living in a quiet suburban neighborhood in Indiana. Caroline and I had been married for 10 years, and we had a 7-year-old son, Jake. He's the center of our world, or at least he used to be. These days, I'm not so sure about what's at the center anymore. Started subtly, things that at first didn't seem like much. Caroline started working late more often. She's a graphic designer, and her agency was always slammed with deadlines, so it made sense at first. But it was happening a lot more. And then there was the phone, her phone, she never used to hide it from me. We'd both leave our phones around the house, and it was no big deal. But I noticed she was keeping it close all the time, like it was attached to her hand. When I asked her about it, she said it was just work stuff, nothing I'd be interested in. Maybe I'm paranoid. I've never been the jealous type, but you know how sometimes you just get a feeling? Like an itch in the back of your mind that something's off, but you can't put your finger on it? That was me. It wasn't anything big enough to accuse her of anything. Just little things adding up. The late nights, the phone, the way she seemed distracted when we talked. Even when we were together, it felt like she wasn't really with me. The first time I really started to worry was when I found out she'd gone out to lunch with a guy from her office. A new guy, Jason. I didn't think much of it at first. People have work friends, right? But then I found out she hadn't mentioned it to me. We talked about our days all the time, and she hadn't said a word. When I brought it up, she brushed it off like it was no big deal. Why didn't you tell me? I asked her one night as we were getting ready for bed. Tell you what? She replied, acting like she didn't know what I was talking about. About Jason. You went to lunch with him, right? It's not a big deal, I don't know why you didn't mention it. Caroline looked at me like I was crazy. Ethan, it was just lunch. We were both hungry, and we work together. Do I have to tell you every time I grab a sandwich with someone? No, I said, feeling like I was overreacting. I don't know. You usually tell me stuff like that. She sighed, rolling her eyes. You're being ridiculous. It was nothing. Maybe I was being ridiculous. But that didn't make the feeling go away. Things went on like that for a while. Life continued as normal. Jake's school events, dinners together, weekends spent with friends. But in the back of my mind, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. Then came the night that changed everything. It was a Friday, and Caroline was out. Again. She had told me she was meeting up with some old friends from work. I believed her, at least I tried to. But that nagging doubt wouldn't go away. It had been months of this now. The late nights, the phone glued to her hand, the increasing distance between us. I decided to check. I'm not proud of it, but I was desperate. I grabbed her laptop, knowing she used it for work, and logged in. My heart was pounding in my chest. I didn't even know what I was looking for, but I couldn't stop myself. Then I found it, an email from Jason. The subject line was innocent enough, something about a project they were working on. But the contents, well, they told a different story. I sat there staring at the email, my mind racing. At first glance, it seemed like a typical work email, discussions about deadlines and designs. But towards the end, things took a turn. Jason had signed off with, "Looking forward to seeing you again soon, winky face." That little winking smiley face felt like a punch to the gut. Maybe it was nothing, I told myself. Maybe I was overreacting. But then I scrolled up, and there were more messages. A lot more. They weren't overtly romantic, but there was an easiness to their exchanges. A flirtatious tone in some of Jason's responses. Caroline had kept things professional, mostly. But reading those messages, I couldn't shake the feeling that there was something more going on. Something I wasn't seeing. I didn't know what to do. Part of me wanted to confront her right then and there. But what would I even say? I couldn't accuse her of cheating based on a few emails. I needed more. So, I did something I never thought I'd do. I snooped further. I started with her social media accounts, scrolling through her messages and comments. Nothing seemed out of the ordinary there. But then I opened her phone records. Caroline had never been secretive about her phone before, so I knew her passcode. It hadn't changed. I felt sick as I went through her call logs and texts, and that's when I found it. There were texts between her and Jason. They weren't explicit or anything, but the timing of them was what hit me. Messages sent late at night, long after she was supposedly working. A lot of work-related conversations happening when she wasn't even at the office. And just like the emails, the texts weren't filled with romantic words, but the undercurrent was clear. There was something between them. I was furious, but at the same time, I felt like I was going crazy. I couldn't prove anything beyond inappropriate behavior, and if I confronted her now, she'd just deny it, twist it around, make me out to be the paranoid husband. So I waited. The next few weeks were torture. Every time Caroline walked in the door after a long day at work, I found myself scrutinizing her every move. Was she avoiding eye contact? Did she seem too cheerful or too distant? I was becoming someone I didn't recognize. Suspicious, angry, anxious. And she seemed completely oblivious. Maybe she was that good at hiding it, or maybe she truly believed she wasn't doing anything wrong. One night, after Jake had gone to bed, I decided to test her. Casually, I brought up Jason again. "So, how's work going? How's Jason settling in?" She glanced at me, her eyes narrowing for a split second before she quickly smiled. "Jason? Oh, he's fine. We don't really work together much anymore. Different projects, you know?" Her answer was so smooth, so effortless, that it almost made me doubt myself. Almost. "Yeah, I just remember you mentioning him a lot before," I said, trying to keep my tone light, as if I was just making conversation. Caroline shrugged. "He's just one of the guys. Nothing special." "Why do you ask?" It was the way she said it, nothing special. Like she was trying to downplay him. My stomach turned. She was lying, or at the very least, hiding something. I didn't push further that night, but I started watching her more closely. I'd notice when she'd laugh at a text message, or when she'd disappear into the other room to take a call. I started keeping track of her comings and goings. And then, finally, I got my break. It was a Saturday, and Caroline had told me she was going to the gym, something she'd recently started doing on the weekends. I didn't think much of it at first, but after she left, I had an idea. I grabbed Jake, told him we were going to run some errands, and I drove by the gym. Her car wasn't there. Now, there could have been a perfectly reasonable explanation. Maybe she hadn't gotten there yet, or maybe she was running late. But the uneasy feeling in my gut told me otherwise. I waited for 20 minutes, watching the parking lot like a hawk. Still, no sign of her. I decided to drive around a bit, trying to shake the paranoia. But just as I was about to give up, I saw her car, parked in front of a small cafe on the other side of town. And there she was, sitting inside with Jason. From where I sat in my car, I couldn't hear their conversation, but their body language said it all. The way she leaned in close, smiling, laughing at something he'd said. His hand casually brushing hers across the table. They looked like a couple, not co-workers. My hands gripped the steering wheel so tight I thought I might snap it in two. I wanted to storm in there 'cause the scene demanded answers, but something stopped me. Instead, I drove away, my mind racing. I needed a plan. If I was going to confront her, I needed to do it right. I needed to be sure. That night, I didn't say a word about what I'd seen. I played it cool, acted like everything was fine, even though inside I was seething. I knew I had to wait just a little longer. I needed proof. After seeing Caroline with Jason at the cafe, I felt a burning urgency to get to the bottom of this. I was done playing games. Whatever was going on between them, I needed to know for sure. But confronting her without solid evidence would just give her an excuse to lie or turn it back on me, make me seem like the crazy, insecure husband. No, I needed something undeniable. So, I did something that I'm still not proud of. I hired a private investigator. His name was Greg, a quiet guy in his early 40s with a look that said he'd seen more than he wanted to in this line of work. He was efficient, professional, and, most importantly, discreet. I told him everything, the late nights, the weird behavior, the lunches with Jason. He nodded, taking notes, but never once did he give me any judgmental looks. I guess he'd heard it all before. "I'll need a week," Greg said. "Maybe less if something comes up sooner. I'll follow her, see where she goes, and we'll take it from there." Felt strange, putting my wife under surveillance. Part of me hated myself for it, but the other part of me needed to know. If I was right, then I had every reason to do this. If I was wrong, well, at least I'd have peace of mind. The next few days dragged by, each one feeling longer than the last. Caroline continued with her usual routine: work, the gym, dinners with friends. But every time she left the house, I wondered where she was really going. And if Greg was right behind her, watching, waiting for the moment she slipped up. I started checking my phone constantly, waiting for a call or text from Greg. But the longer it went on, the more I began to second-guess myself. Maybe there was nothing to find. Maybe she really was just busy with work, and Jason was nothing more than a harmless flirtation. Maybe I was blowing this all out of proportion. Then, on the fourth day, Greg called. "Ethan, I've got something," he said, his voice steady but firm. "You're going to want to see this." My heart raced. "What is it? What did you find?" "Meet me at the address I'm about to text you. And don't be late." 20 minutes later, I pulled up to a motel on the outskirts of town. It wasn't one of those seedy places with flashing neon signs, but it wasn't exactly high-end either. The kind of place people go when they don't want to be seen. My stomach twisted as I parked my car and saw Greg standing by the entrance, a grim look on his face. He handed me a folder without saying a word. I opened it, my hands trembling as I sifted through the photos inside. There she was, Caroline, walking into the motel arm in arm with Jason. My heart sank as I flipped through the pictures, each one worse than the last. The two of them, laughing together, holding hands, disappearing into one of the rooms. And then, an hour later, walking out looking far too comfortable with each other. There was no mistaking it now. No more doubts, no more excuses. Caroline was having an affair. I felt numb, like my brain was refusing to process what I was seeing. I'd suspected for so long, but actually seeing the proof in front of me, it was like a punch to the gut. I'd been right, but that didn't make it any easier. If anything, it made it worse. "Are you okay?" Greg asked, breaking the silence. I shook my head, still staring at the photos.
No.
"No, I'm not." Greg gave me a sympathetic nod. "Look, I know this is hard, but you needed to know. What you do with this information now is up to you. I can keep following her. Get more evidence if you need it for a lawyer or anything like that." I took a deep breath, trying to steady myself. "No, I've seen enough. I know what I need to do." Greg left, and I sat in my car for what felt like hours, just staring at those pictures. I couldn't believe this was my life. The woman I'd married, the woman I thought I'd spend the rest of my life with, had betrayed me in the worst possible way. And now I had to figure out what to do next. When I got home that night, Caroline was already in bed. I stood in the doorway of our bedroom, watching her sleep, feeling a wave of emotions I couldn't even begin to untangle. Anger, sadness, betrayal, and, oddly enough, a part of me still loved her. I wanted to shake her awake, throw the photos in her face, demand an explanation. But I knew that wouldn't get me the answers I needed. I needed to confront her, but I needed to do it right, calmly, with the proof in hand so she couldn't deny it, couldn't twist it around. I needed her to own up to what she'd done. The next morning, I woke up before Caroline. I sat at the kitchen table, staring at my coffee, waiting for her to come down. When she did, she smiled at me. That same easy smile that had always melted my heart. But today it just made me feel sick. "Morning," she said, pouring herself a cup of coffee. "You're up early." "Yeah," I replied, my voice strained. "We need to talk." Caroline paused, glancing at me over her cup. "About what?" I slid the folder across the table, my heart pounding in my chest. "About this." She looked at the folder, her smile fading as she opened it and saw the photos inside. For a moment, she was silent, just staring at them. Then she looked up at me, her face pale. Ethan, I can explain. Don't. I cut her off, my voice trembling with anger. Don't lie to me. I've seen enough. Just tell me the truth. Caroline's eyes filled with tears, but I wasn't sure if they were from guilt or fear of being caught. Either way, it didn't matter anymore. I needed answers. Caroline's face was pale, her hands trembling slightly as she held the photos in her hands. I could see the gears turning in her head, like she was trying to figure out how to salvage the situation. But it was too late for that. She was cornered, and we both knew it. Ethan, please, she started, but I cut her off again, my patience hanging by a thread. No more excuses, Caroline. No more lies, I said, my voice low and tight. I deserve the truth. Just tell me what's going on between you and Jason. I need to hear it from you. Her eyes darted to the floor, avoiding mine. She let out a shaky breath, and I could see her trying to muster the courage to speak. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, she looked up at me, tears welling in her eyes. I didn't mean for it to happen, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. It just happened, Ethan. I swear, I never meant to hurt you. I clenched my jaw, trying to keep my emotions in check. How long, Caroline? How long have you been lying to me? She wiped at her tears, but they kept coming. A few months. It started after that night when we had that big fight. I was upset, and Jason, he was just there for me. He listened. He made me feel understood. I closed my eyes, feeling a surge of anger and betrayal. So that was it? That stupid argument we had months ago, the one I barely even remembered, was the catalyst for her to jump into another man's arms? And what about all the times you said you were working late, or going to the gym? I demanded, my voice rising despite my efforts to stay calm. She winced at my tone. I wasn't always lying, Ethan. But sometimes, yes. I was meeting Jason. Meeting him where? I asked, though I already knew the answer. The photos from the motel flashed in my mind. Caroline hesitated for a moment, then sighed, defeated. We went to hotels, just to talk at first, but then she trailed off, and I didn't need her to finish the sentence. I knew exactly what she was about to say. The betrayal cut deep, like a knife twisting in my gut. I trusted you, I said, my voice barely above a whisper. I trusted you, and you threw it all away. For what? For him. Caroline shook her head frantically. No, Ethan, it's not like that. I still love you. I never stopped loving you. It was a mistake. A mistake. I interrupted, my voice hardening. A mistake is forgetting our anniversary. A mistake is leaving the stove on. What you did was a choice, Caroline. You chose to lie to me. You chose to sleep with Jason. She buried her face in her hands, sobbing.
I'm sorry.
I'm so sorry, Ethan. I never wanted it to get this far. I sat there, staring at her, feeling a strange mix of anger and sadness. Part of me wanted to scream at her, to lash out, to make her feel even a fraction of the pain she'd caused me. But another part of me just felt empty, like all the fight had been drained out of me. How many times? I asked quietly, my eyes fixed on the table in front of me. How many times did you sleep with him? Caroline hesitated for a moment, then whispered, 3. Just the sound of that number made me want to punch something. 3 times she'd betrayed me. 3 times she'd chosen him over me. And those were just the times she was willing to admit. Who knew how many more there had been? I took a deep breath, trying to steady myself. Why? Why him? What does he have that I don't? Caroline looked up at me, her face streaked with tears. It wasn't about him, Ethan. It was never about him. It was about me. I felt like I was drowning, like we were stuck in this routine. I didn't feel alive anymore. And Jason, he made me feel like I mattered again. So, this is my fault? I asked bitterly. You cheated on me because you were bored? Because I wasn't giving you enough excitement? No, she cried. No, that's not what I mean. I know I messed up. I know I hurt you, and I wish I could take it all back. But I can't. All I can do is tell you the truth and hope that somehow you'll forgive me. Forgive her? The word felt foreign in my mind. How was I supposed to forgive her for this? For betraying everything we had built together? For throwing away our marriage like it was nothing? I stood up from the table, pacing back and forth, trying to wrap my head around everything. I didn't know what to do. Part of me wanted to walk out the door and never look back. But another part of me, the part that had loved Caroline for so long, wanted to believe her. Wanted to believe that maybe we could fix this. I need time, I finally said, my voice strained. I don't know what I'm going to do, but I need time to think. Caroline nodded, wiping at her tears. Take all the time you need. I'll do whatever it takes to make this right. I didn't respond. Couldn't. Instead, I grabbed my jacket and walked out of the house, leaving her alone with her guilt and the mess she'd created. As I drove aimlessly through town, my mind raced with questions. Could I ever forgive her? Could I ever trust her again? Or was this the end of our marriage? Every time I thought about those photos, about her with Jason, my stomach churned with anger and betrayal. But as much as I wanted to hate her, I couldn't shake the memories of the life we'd built together. The good times, the laughter, the love we'd shared. What the hell was I supposed to do now? The night felt endless as I drove aimlessly through town, lost in the fog of my thoughts. Every corner, every street I passed brought up memories of Caroline and me. Our first date, our favorite restaurants, the park where we walked our dog. It felt surreal, like those memories belonged to another lifetime. A distant past where we were happy and unaware of what would come. I ended up parking by the beach, a place I always went when I needed to clear my head. The rhythmic sound of the waves crashing against the shore was calming, even if it didn't make everything easier to process. I sat there, staring out at the dark water, trying to figure out what I was supposed to feel. The betrayal stung so deeply. Caroline had been my partner, my best friend, and the one person I thought I could always rely on. But now, everything was tainted by her lies and deceit. How could I ever look at her the same way again? How could I pretend like things could go back to normal after knowing what she had done? As I sat there, the wind tugging at my jacket, I thought about Jason. My mind kept circling back to him. The smugness on his face that night at the party. The way he always seemed so comfortable around Caroline. He wasn't just some random guy she had cheated with. He was someone who had wormed his way into our lives, who had been close to me, who I had considered a friend. And now he had betrayed me too. That realization burned even hotter than before. It wasn't just Caroline's infidelity. It was the fact that Jason had been there, pretending to care about me while he was sneaking around behind my back with my wife. The more I thought about it, the angrier I got. I pulled out my phone and stared at the screen. Part of me wanted to call him, demand answers, scream at him, confront him about everything. But another part of me knew that talking to him wouldn't make this hurt any less. He didn't deserve my time or energy. He had already taken too much from me. Instead, I called Ryan, my brother. He picked up on the second ring, his voice groggy with sleep. Ethan? Everything okay? Man, it's late. I hesitated, the weight of what I was about to say pressing down on me. Ryan, she cheated. Caroline cheated on me. There was a pause. Then Ryan's voice sharpened. What? Are you serious? Yeah, I said, my throat tight. With Jason. She admitted everything. Jason? Your buddy Jason? The guy from work. Ryan's disbelief mirrored my own. Yeah, him. I could hear Ryan take a deep breath, trying to wrap his head around it. Jesus, Ethan. I'm so sorry, man. What are you going to do? I don't know, I admitted. I'm sitting at the beach, trying to figure it all out. She says she's sorry, that it was a mistake. But I don't know if I can forgive her. Ryan was silent for a moment, and I could tell he was choosing his words carefully. Look, man, I know this is the hardest thing you've probably ever dealt with, but you've got to take some time to really think about it. Don't make any decisions while you're still in the heat of the moment. But whatever you do, you deserve better than this. You don't owe her anything after what she did. His words hit me hard. He was right, I needed to think things through. But deep down, I knew that no amount of thinking would ever change what had happened. The damage was done, and nothing could erase it. "I'll figure it out," I said, though I wasn't sure if I even believed it. I just needed to talk to someone. I didn't know who else to call. "I'm here for you, bro," Ryan said, his voice firm. "Whatever you need, just let me know. And if you want, you can stay at my place for a while. Get some space, clear your head." "Thanks," I said, appreciating the offer. "I might take you up on that." We talked a little longer, Ryan giving me advice and reminding me that I wasn't alone in this. It helped, if only a little, to know that someone had my back. But as I hung up the phone and stared out at the water again, the weight of what had happened settled back over me. I stayed at the beach for a while, watching the waves roll in and out, feeling the cold wind on my face. And then, finally, I made a decision. I couldn't just let this go. I couldn't pretend like everything was fine and try to move on without answers. I needed closure, even if it wasn't going to be pretty. So I went home. The house was dark and quiet when I walked in, and Caroline was sitting on the couch, her face streaked with tears, her eyes red and swollen from crying. She looked up when I entered, her expression full of guilt and regret. "I didn't think you were coming back," she whispered. I didn't respond. Instead, I walked over and sat down across from her, keeping my distance. I didn't want her comfort. I wanted the truth. "Tell me everything," I said, my voice low and steady. "No more lies. I want to know how this started, how long it's been going on, and why." Caroline swallowed hard, her hands trembling as she wiped at her face. She took a deep breath, then started to speak, her words slow and deliberate. "It started after that night we had that fight. You remember? The one where we didn't talk for days? I was upset, and I ran into Jason at the coffee shop. He offered to buy me a drink and we talked. First, it was nothing, just a friend listening to me vent. But it didn't stop there. I clenched my fists, trying to stay calm as she continued. We started meeting up for coffee more often, and then it was lunch, and then he kissed me. I should have stopped it right there, but I didn't. I don't know. I was angry at you. I felt neglected, and Jason made me feel wanted." Her words twisted in my gut, the betrayal cutting deeper with every sentence. "How long?" I asked, my voice tight. 6 months, she admitted, her voice barely a whisper. "It's been going on for 6 months. 6 months. Half a year of lies and deceit. Right under my nose. I felt sick to my stomach. And you never thought to stop? To end it before it got out of hand?" I asked, my voice rising with anger. Caroline looked down, ashamed. "I tried. I did. But every time I thought I could stop, I just couldn't." The silence between us was heavy, suffocating. I didn't know what to say. Part of me wanted to scream at her, to lash out and make her feel the pain she'd caused me. But another part of me just felt tired. Tired of the lies. Tired of the betrayal. Tired of trying to make sense of it all. "I need time," I finally said, my voice strained. "I need space to figure out what I'm going to do." Caroline nodded, her eyes full of regret. "I understand." And with that, I stood up and walked out the door, leaving her behind in the darkness of our broken home. The days that followed were some of the longest of my life. I stayed at Ryan's place, sleeping on his couch, barely able to focus on anything other than the storm of emotions swirling in my head. Caroline had tried to call me a few times, but I wasn't ready to talk to her. Every time her name popped up on my phone, I felt a surge of anger and hurt all over again. Ryan did his best to be there for me, giving me space when I needed it, but also offering advice when he thought it would help. "You can't just avoid her forever," he said one night as we sat in his living room, beers in hand. "You've got to decide what you want to do. Either you try to work things out or you end it. But you can't stay in limbo forever." He was right, of course. I knew I couldn't keep running from the situation. But the truth was, I still didn't know what I wanted. A part of me hated Caroline for what she had done, for betraying me so completely. But another part of me still loved her, still remembered the good times we had shared and the life we had built together. Was that enough to try to save our marriage? Or was it too late? It wasn't until the following weekend that I finally gathered the courage to go back to the house. Caroline had texted me earlier that day, asking if we could talk. I knew it was time to face her, to face the reality of what our marriage had become. When I walked through the door, the house felt eerily quiet. Caroline was sitting at the kitchen table, her hands nervously clasped in front of her. She looked up when I entered, her eyes red and tired, like she hadn't slept in days. "Hey," she said softly, her voice tentative. "Hey," I replied, keeping my distance as I sat down across from her. There was a long, uncomfortable silence between us. Neither of us seemed to know where to start. Finally, Caroline spoke. "I've been thinking a lot about everything," she said, her voice shaky. "About what I did, about us. I know I hurt you in the worst possible way, Ethan, and I know I have no right to ask for forgiveness. But I want to try. I want to fix this if you'll let me." I didn't respond right away, trying to process her words. I had expected her to ask for forgiveness, to try and explain herself again. But hearing her say it still made me feel conflicted. "I don't know if it can be fixed," I admitted, my voice quiet. "I don't know if I can ever trust you again. Every time I look at you now, all I see is him. All I think about is what you did with him." Caroline's face crumpled, tears welling up in her eyes. "I know," she whispered. "I know I broke your trust, and I don't expect it to come back easily. But I'm willing to do whatever it takes to make it right. I love you, Ethan. I've always loved you, and I hate myself for what I did." Her words hung in the air, heavy with emotion. Part of me wanted to believe her, wanted to believe that she was truly remorseful and that we could somehow rebuild what we had lost. But another part of me, an angrier, more cynical part, couldn't help but think about how long she had lied to me. 6 months of deception, 6 months of sneaking around with Jason. Could I really forgive that? "You say you love me," I said, my voice sharper than I intended. "But you didn't think about that when you were with him, did you? You didn't think about me when you were sneaking off to meet him, when you were lying to my face every single day. How am I supposed to believe you now?" Caroline winced at my words, the guilt written all over her face. "You're right," she said, her voice breaking. "I didn't think. I was selfish and I made the worst mistake of my life. But I swear to you, Ethan, it meant nothing. I wasn't in love with him. It was just a terrible, stupid thing that got out of control. You're the one I love. You're the one I want to be with." I looked at her, my heart torn in two. I could see the sincerity in her eyes, the desperation in her voice. But was that enough? Could I really let go of the hurt and betrayal? Could I forgive her and move forward? "I don't know if I can do this," I said, my voice raw with emotion. "I don't know if I can ever get past what you did." Caroline's face crumpled, tears streaming down her cheeks. "Please," she begged, her voice barely above a whisper. "Please just give me a chance. Let me prove to you that I can be better, that we can be better." I sat there, staring at the woman I had once thought I would spend the rest of my life with, feeling more lost than ever. Part of me wanted to walk away, to leave her and never look back. But another part of me, the part that still remembered the love we had shared, the life we had built together, wanted to believe that maybe, just maybe, we could find a way to heal. After what felt like an eternity, I finally spoke. "I need time," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. "I don't know what I want yet. I need time to figure it out." Caroline nodded, her face full of sorrow but also a glimmer of hope. "Take all the time you need," she said softly. "I'll be here waiting, and I'll do whatever it takes to prove to you that I'm worth another chance." I stood up, feeling the weight of the world on my shoulders as I walked toward the door. As I stepped outside, the cool night air hit me, and I took a deep breath, trying to steady myself. I didn't know what the future held, or whether I would ever be able to forgive her. But for now, I just needed space. Space to think, to heal, to figure out where to go from here. And as I walked away from the house, I realized that whatever happened next, my life would never be the same again.